Welcome to University Public Worship at Stanford Memorial Church. Together while apart, we are very grateful to continue to create community, care, and inspiration during these days of uncertainty and unrest. Thank you for joining us. I'm the Reverend Dr. Joanne Sanders, Senior Associate Dean for Religious Life, joined today by my colleagues, Dean Tiffany Steinwert, Senior Associate Dean Rabbi Patricia Carlin Newman, University Organist and Choir Director Robert Hugh Morgan, and members of the Memorial Church Choir. We are especially grateful today for our colleague, Associate Minister and Director of Student Engagement, Reverend Colleen Halligan-Priniger, who worked with our student team to craft this special service today, and for the incredible support of our sound technician, Michael Hodgson. Today's service has been created by students who have participated this academic year in the Fellowship for Religious Encounter, affectionately known as FREE. Rabbi Patricia, Dean Steinwert, and I have had the delight and honor to meet weekly with our students in the Circle, our interreligious space in Old Union, where we share a meal, conversation, and discussion across religious and spiritual traditions. Spring quarter required us to adapt and pivot to continue our community virtually, with our beloved students scattered across the country and globe. What is FREE? First and foremost, it is a place where trust and deep friendship is created, where belonging and community are central in the desire to ask larger questions of life for ourselves and each other. What brings life meaning and purpose? How do our traditions speak to these questions? Who do I want to be for the sake of the world? Grounded in their own practice, understanding, and religious spiritual tradition, FREE, especially this year and quarter, has been a place to seek from one another meaningful insight during difficult and formative times. They have led and taught one another along the way, facilitating rich conversations and experiences. One of the profound aspects of FREE is to give back in some way to the wider campus community what this experience has meant and how it has shaped and transformed their time at Stanford. Our FREE students have contributed daily reflections and wisdom for the way, as well as our podcast, Voices of Hope, as a way to invite others into their FREE experience and what they have gained from it. You can find those on our website, spiritualsites.stanford. And now today for UPW, our students will offer reflections, music, poetry in our gathering today for inspiration and sustenance. The theme our FREE students have chosen is joy, interwoven among each contribution today. Patricia, Tiffany, and I are deeply grateful to have shared this journey with our FREE cohort this year. They have profoundly brought immeasurable joy to our lives, especially in the midst of such an astonishing and altering time over these past few months. We have been brought together into real kindness and belonging, whose love and warmth has changed all of us. We know that you will enjoy hearing from them today, and no doubt be encouraged, uplifted, and inspired. Thank you for joining us.
As we enter into this time of reflection and celebration, let us take a moment to center ourselves, that we might be awake to this moment in the midst of everything, ready to hear, reflect, and respond. Find yourself in the place where you are. Sit up straight with your feet firmly planted on the ground. Straighten your spine. Close your eyes. Breathe in through your nose. Hold your breath and breathe out through your mouth. We'll do this 3 more times. Breathe in. Hold. Breathe out. Breathe in. Hold. Breathe out. Breathe in. Hold. Breathe out. Open your eyes. Open your heart. May you receive the blessings of these reflections today with joy.
Hello, my name is Michelle, and I was part of this year's free cohort. Recently, I've questioned whether any one of us is entitled to joy. When COVID struck and my senior spring and graduation were ripped away from me, I became suddenly aware of the privilege I exercised in expecting these moments of peak joy to occur. I'd never considered the stream of goodness I'd experienced in college to end so swiftly and horrifyingly. Accepting this still feels surreal. Accepting that I will not experience many of my former Stanford joys ever again still feels surreal. These past few days have pushed me further still to consider if any one of us deserve to derive joy from a world designed to deny joy from others. The joys I've experienced at Stanford were constructed. They were built to serve us, and primarily only us. I was not unaware of this. The difficulty I experienced traveling to my hometown of Tucson, Arizona, and explaining to my mother, a Mexican immigrant who's never worked for more than minimum wage, would often awaken me to this reality. But it was a reality that I'd quickly and eagerly allow Stanford joys to whisk me away from. In this moment of awakening to potential truths about my life's joys, what they were precisely and why I've been able to experience them, and why I may not actually deserve them, I feel very lost inside of my own head. The questions pound. But while I lack any sort of religious faith to turn to, there are memories and thoughts and observations which relieve the red hot burn of loss and confusion. Friends, nature, and art in the form of literature, and music, and others. I hesitantly call these baseline joys, gifts of support which I believe ground most of us universally, and which I hope most of us have access to today. I call attention to these joys now and encourage you to consider if any other joy on your list is one of entitlement or privilege, and if so, how you can go about ensuring others have the ability to experience what you consider life's joys. Free has not provided any definitive answers to the questions I posed earlier, but it has helped me realize a platform for addressing them: sharing joy. The sharing of your joys with people who may be unfamiliar with or lack access to them is fundamental to free. I thank this group for coming together week by week with the intention of sharing joy. I believe everyone in my cohort to be a person who would go out of her way to gift her joys to others, and I believe this group has equipped one another to ensure our life's joys are shared not only with our known communities, but with those we would otherwise not connect with. If you truly believe in your joys, then I hope you're willing to make sacrifices to ensure other human beings can experience them too. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is JJ, and I'm here with Ivani, and both of us are members of the Fellowship for Religious Encounter, Free, and we are really excited to talk during this UPW service about the topic of joy and what it means to us. And we thought we would do this presentation together since we both had some similar thoughts on the topic. And yeah, we really look forward to going through this presentation with all of you.
And before we dive in, I just wanted to take the time to acknowledge all that's going on in the world right now, and that sometimes it's okay to not feel joy, and especially at a time like this. This is like a moment of deep grief and frustration and sadness, and we hope that all of you are taking care of yourselves in whatever way that means. And I think one thing that I've been turning to is what Barack Obama wrote, which is that I really hope that this moment is a turning point for real change. And here we'll be talking about some of the things that we've turned to for the small joys in our lives.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk a little bit about a concept in the Sikh faith called Chardi Kala. And Chardi Kala translates roughly to everlasting optimism, even in the face of hardship. And many of the Sikh gurus, when they would fight in battle for what they believed in, and were dealing through a lot of difficult times when the Mughals came into India, and there was an ethnic cleansing in much of India during the 1700s. And as Sikhs were trying to defend their identities, they kept turning back to this concept of Chardi Kala, where it's really this belief in you can only fully realize joy through pain and through suffering. It is the lows that we encounter that help us to understand our highs. And especially during a difficult time that we're living in light of the coronavirus pandemic, in light of George Floyd's death and much of the unrest in our country at this time, I'm also reminded of Chardi Kala, that it is through moments of suffering and pain where we can begin to realize and turn to joy as well. So one of the things that tends to bring a lot of joy to me is the show Inside Out. It's a great movie, highly recommended if you haven't seen it. And here is actually the main character, Joy. And we would just love to talk about what Ivani said, just the things that we've been turning to in our lives that have brought us joy, particularly during this quarantine.
Yeah, and there's this beautiful book that I read, 40 Rules of Love, and I really appreciate this quote from the book. And essentially talks about dancing through life, dancing through both the ups and downs. So we will dance our way through love and heartbreak. We will dance in the middle of a brawl or a major war, all the same, with joy and elation, alone and together, as slow and fast as the flow of water. And to me, this is a wonderful reminder that there are still small things that we can appreciate and dance through, even when the world seems to be crumbling down. And JJ and I have definitely had our fair share of that.
Yeah, we the other night Ivani sent me a message and was like, let's just do a spontaneous dance party. And I was like, oh my God, that sounds great. And so we just kind of hopped on a Zoom call and just started dancing. And so I think something that I'm reminded of as well is, Ivani, could you go actually back as well to that previous slide? So for your movie fans out there, this is John Travolta, who is literally my idol. And this is from Saturday Night Fever. And I think John Travolta, sometimes we need to channel our inner John Travolta and dance like nobody's watching. And I think that the other beautiful thing about dance that I think this quote from 40 Rules of Love really shows us is, have any of you ever danced the waltz before? And if you've danced the waltz, you would know that it's this beautiful thing where the whole world is chaos around you because you are spinning with your partner in hand at quite a high rate. Yet it's chaos but it's this controlled chaos where it's actually you find joy by going into this beautiful state of flow through that dance. So when I think about the quote Ivani mentioned, I think about the waltz as well.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. And I think the waltz is also this like great form of communication between two people. And I don't know, I think that's like something also really beautiful about dance. It's like it's a language in and of itself. And I think another thing is putting things in perspective. And JJ shared this um, detail about, or like this study that was done about how lucky we are to actually be alive. And this doctor essentially calculated the probability of you specifically, not your brother or your sister, being alive. And it's actually 1 in 10 to 2,685,000, which is crazy, as JJ is so showing here. And to put things in perspective, there are like 1 in 10 to the, I think, 80 atoms in the universe. And so this just really shows how incredible it is just to be breathing and to wake up in the morning and be living. And I think this is a wonderful reminder that in and of itself is a joy, just to be alive.
Yes, certainly. So a beautiful thing to just think about that when we wake up in the morning, how amazing to think like, wow, my life right now, the fact that I'm alive in this moment is like winning the lottery 1,000 times in a row. And I think that, Ivani said this beautiful quote the other day about how we need to live like the miracles that we are. And I think that's a beautiful thing that mathematical study can show us. And another thing that we wanted to talk about that has been bringing us joy during the quarantine are really realizing that the things we take for granted. And I got to be completely honest, when Stanford was sort of transitioning to sending their undergraduates home, I really did not feel ready to go home. And part of that was because I think Stanford was beginning to feel like home for me. But the silver lining of that is I've got to come home. I've got to spend a lot of time with my family. And so some of these pictures of the left are family game night. We love the game Taboo. And on the right are some pictures I took with the Polaroid camera. My family, we're huge foodies. And we sort of in these pictures, I'm learning some of the recipes that my family has made for me literally for years and years. But I'm starting to take an interest in how to cook, and cooking and playing games, and for me playing the guitar are things that I'm starting to really appreciate, that I have always been in my life, but I feel like are more present in my life now that I have all of this extra time to spend with my family at home.
Yeah. And yeah, I think similarly for me, just appreciating the small things that my family does. And one thing that has happened new since quarantine is my mom and I both love coffee, and she will make Starbucks at home, but she takes chocolate powder and makes these beautiful designs. Um, and instead of Starbucks, she calls them Star Loves. And it's not just this one, but many, many more. And one time she put this smiley face, and she made an E and an A for my sister and I. And it's just a wonderful thing to drink as well as look at, and feel the love that I'm very grateful for.
And we also wanted to talk about how free has brought joy to us. And so I think being a part of the Fellowship for Religious Encounter, one aspect of it are these meetups with our free buddy, where we have a scheduled meeting with someone from our free cohort outside of class or outside of our weekly meetings. And one of the great joys of mine has been going to these meetings. And this is a picture of Isaac, who is a member of our cohort. And this is actually, you can kind of see there's a little drink on the bottom right corner of the screen. And one thing both Isaac and I realized was our mutual love of chai. So we actually went to Coupa more than once, even when we didn't have a buddy meetup, and we'd get some tiger spice chai from Coupa, and we'd sit down on a bench and we would just catch up. And I think one of the things I really appreciate about Free, and the thing that's brought me the most joy, have been the relationships that I've built with so many of the members of my cohort that are buddies and friends, and are people that I've continued to keep in touch with, even now that we are sort of getting towards the end of the year.
Yeah, I totally share that sentiment, and have really appreciated getting to know people both in our weekly meetings as well as outside of them. And I've also really appreciated the different perspectives that I get to hear during our meetings. And we had this one conversation about how do we define morality, especially in this world where maybe we don't always see that, or we live in a world where that doesn't always have good things happening. And Sterling gave this wonderful perspective that of viewing people kind of how numbers exist on a number line. And, like the number 6 is larger than the number 4, but it's no more important. And the number 6 can't exist without number 4 existing. And similarly in our society, we can't compare people and compare the goodness of people, and also we can't really exist without each other. And I think that was just like a wonderful metaphor that I really appreciated, and that just put things in a different perspective.
And really, honestly, to close, biggest thing we want to emphasize here is the greatest things in life are free. And for those of you in the audience or who are listening to this right now, you might recognize that quote. It is from a song from Tom Jones, which is "Help Yourself." And, there's sort of, the greatest things in life are free. Just help yourself. Take a few. That's what I want you to do. Just help yourself. Anyways, great song. Love Tom Jones. Feel free to take a listen in your free time. And in fact, all of these songs are on this album.
And I'll just give snaps to JJ's beautiful singing. But thank you so much for listening. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your Sunday, and to take care and just enjoy the gift of breathing.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Everyone, I hope this song that I'm about to play by Passenger, called "Let Her Go," persuades all of you to not take for granted the relationships you currently have while you have them in the present moment. A 1, a 2, a 1, 2, skiddly do. Well, you only need the light when it's burning low. Only miss the sun when it starts to snow. Only know you love her when you let her go. Only know you've been high when you're feeling low. Only hate the road when you're missing home. Only know you love her when you let her go. Staring at the bottom of your glass, hoping one day you'll make a dream last. But dreams come slow and they go so fast. You see her when you close your eyes. Maybe one day you'll understand why everything you touch surely dies. But you only need the light when it's burning low. Only hate the sun when it starts to snow. Only know you love her when you let her go. Staring at the ceiling in the dark, same old empty feeling in your heart. But dreams come slow and they go so fast. Well, you see her when you fall asleep, never to touch and never to keep, 'cause you loved her too much and you dive too deep. And you only know the light when it's burning low. Only miss the sun when it starts to snow. Only know you love her when you let her go. Only know you've been high when you're feeling low. Only miss the road when you hate the road when you're missing home. Only know you love her when you let her go. And you let her go.
Hello everyone, and welcome once again to this worship service. My name is Emma. I'm a graduating senior and a member of the Fellowship for Religious Encounter. When this worship service was first planned, joy seemed to be what was most needed. Now, after the murder of George Floyd, and when anti-Black violence and state-sanctioned brutality against peaceful protesters are taking place across the country, it seems absurd for me, a white woman, to stand here and talk about joy. My voice should not be amplified above the voices of Black protesters. And yet, in a time that calls for grief and anger, circumstances have put me here to reflect on joy. In times of turmoil, I look to my Catholic faith tradition for aid in understanding. St. Paul writes that joy is one of what he calls the fruits of the Holy Spirit. The word fruit here, a direct translation of the Greek karpos, strikes me as more than simply figurative. Paul does not say that joy is a gift of the Spirit, something that is provided for us with no effort of our own. Fruit, by contrast, must be cultivated. It takes work on our part to create a fertile ground for this fruit to grow within us. But I wonder, how does one cultivate joy? Paul doesn't say. And so I turn, as I so often do, to the words of St. Francis of Assisi. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born into eternal life. Francis's words call upon us to put ourselves aside and focus on our neighbor's needs. And as I look back on my life thus far, I see that it is in moments of self-forgetting, in acts of service, that joy has come upon me when I was not looking for it. Perhaps it is by putting ourselves and our egos aside that we prepare the soil of our hearts. and by working to restore joy to those from whom it has been taken away, that we water the seeds of joy within ourselves.
Avotenu mekor habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Good morning. I am Dean Tiffany Steinwert, and I have the honor of serving on staff at the Office for Religious Life. Over the course of this year, I had the privilege of accompanying this cohort of fellows for Religious Encounter. Do you remember our very first day together right here in Memchu? Okay, so I'm not really in Memchu, but you knew that, right? We gathered with University Public Worship at the congregation to bless and commission these graduate and undergraduate students for a year of exploration of interfaith and interfaith conversation. And then from UPW, we traveled over to Windover, where we began to explore new spiritual practices as we formed friendships with one another. That launched us into a series of conversations, sharing weekly meals in the circle, kind of here. Imagine, right? It was a year of learning. It was a year of growing. This cohort, more than any others, has embodied Jane Stanford's vision for the university. When planning for the construction and layout of the university, Jane Stanford was absolutely adamant that the church ought to lay at the heart of campus. She understood that the task of education required attention to the whole student, body, mind, and soul. It was not enough for her for students to strengthen their mind through intellectual inquiry. They must also strengthen their heart through spiritual exploration, practice, and deep, intimate dialogue. And while the vision of a church in the center of campus belied the dominance of Western Protestant Christianity at the time, Jane's vision for what spirituality could look like on a college campus wildly exceeded that. Her own spirituality drew from many sources, and her admiration for wisdom, unbound from sectarian and denominational alliances, infused Stanford's understanding of religion with a vision for inclusivity and religious pluralism. Rabbi Jacob Borsanger, one of the 13 clergy who participated in the 1903 dedication of Memorial Church, spoke admiringly of Jane Stanford's open-mindedness, commenting, "Mrs. Stanford has sat at the feet of preachers of every possible denomination and no denomination, Unitarians, Trinitarians, infidels, Brahmins, Buddhists, Mohammedans, materialists, atheists, and they all have been heard, all welcomed, the main condition of their welcome being that they must have something to say. Well, the language is a bit dated, but we know how important it is to have something important to say. And these fellows, well, did they have something to say? All the things, really. But in speaking, they also questioned and reflected, and most of all, learned to listen, and listen deeply. Over the course of this academic year, these students opened their hearts to one another. They forged fast friendships and wrestled with life's most pressing questions. It was in this context, in this community, that they discovered joy, the joy you've just heard them talk about. It's a true joy, not simply born of superficial happiness nor granted by entitlement or privilege, but rather it was a joy cultivated from a depth of experience and sharing, nurtured through difficult conversations, even in times of crisis, conflict, tragedy, and trauma. This year's cohort experienced the world being upended, and they too with it. Their last quarter was entirely virtual. And all of us leading here at the staff, the Office for Religious Life, we wondered, would Zoom hold or contain this cohort? Would students engage? Would they come? Would the conversations be the same? And well, there were some differences, but the depth of conversation, the care and compassion, the concern that students had for one another, I think if it changed at all, it just deepened and grew stronger. The students this year, over this wacky, wild year, discovered a new type of joy, a joy that sprung up at times unsuspectingly in their hearts as they answered silly icebreaker questions. I mean, really, what is your mental age? We spontaneously sometimes would erupt in song or dance, sometimes bringing guitars or dragging us into the sanctuary for a piano. They work diligently to struggle to define and discover what it means to be human in this time, in this space, in this moment in history. And through that, they discovered a joy that celebrated the wonder of being alive, that miraculous odd, calculated mathematically, because of course we are at Stanford, that wonderful, miraculous odd of actually being alive, of you being you. It really is miraculous, isn't it? Through the year, we listened to sacred music, we read sacred texts, we shared poetry and prose, we debated philosophy, we heard from spiritual leaders, from His Holiness the Dalai Lama to Mr. Rogers. And we did all of this in the context of a curiosity about ourselves, each other, and the world. Theological, philosophical, moral, and ethical wrestling, all done over dinner within the safe bounds of unlikely but deeply loving friendships. In a moment, the students will lead us in a litany honoring their time as fellows. The prayer that follows is a blessing for them, yes, but I think it also is a calling to those of us who hear it, an aspiration toward which we ought to strive. May we be blessed by these students' witness and their actions, that we might shape our own lives in the image of joy they have found in this community, reaching across difference, digging deep, critically reflecting on who we are and want to become for the sake of the world. All done in the context of a brilliantly diverse and inclusive family of friends. I know my life has been changed for being part of this cohort of free. I pray yours will be too. So come. Come, let us join the students in their litany and their prayer. A blessing for them, a hope for all of us.
This past academic year, the Rathbun Fellowship for Religious Encounter has created the space and time for us to experience sustained, meaningful religious encounters with one another. We have shared our stories, our questions, our desire to engage in the building of community across traditions in the past year.
We have encountered in each other the teachings, questions, and practices of many religious perspectives. We have collaborated with each other on today's service to celebrate our willingness to learn from and teach one another, to open our hearts to one another, to build friendship and fellowship together in a spirit of seeking justice and peace.
We come together now before this community in the spirit of inter- and intra-faith dialogue. We hope that the bonds of our fellowship may be reflected in this service. As Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King described humanity as an inescapable network of mutuality.
We give thanks for this opportunity to have aspired to be trees planted by streams of water, bringing forth fruit in its season, whose foliage never fades, so that which we have undertaken together has prospered. Source of all wisdom, we give thanks for your help in appreciating the diversity and dignity of your creation.
May what we have learned from one another continue to bring our community together as one. May the integrity of our lives and our fellowship together reflect the sacred dimension of all that unites us, wherever we are, whatever we do. Thank you for helping us know that our lives can sometimes be contradictions, that we sometimes risk undoing the good that we strive for together.
May we continue to be wholehearted in weaving together the rich and colorful strands of the world's traditions. Our search for sanctity, respect, and appreciation for one another's dreams has pervaded our time together. And may our understanding for one another continue to increase well after this fellowship is formally resolved.
Good morning. For those of you whom I don't know, I'm Rabbi Patricia Carlin Newman. I'm the Senior Associate Dean for Religious Life at Stanford. And for the last 14 years, I have had the unmitigated joy of working with students in our Rathbun Fellowship for Religious Encounter. Facilitating this group has always been one of the highlights of our year. When I think of joy, I think of Rabbi Nachman of Bratslev's understanding, mitzvah gedola liyot besimcha tamid. It is an obligation to be joyful always. Now, this may seem like a very difficult lift. Sometimes we are so filled with despair, filled with the power of what surrounds us, the difficulty of creating the world we want to live in. And yet we are obligated to find glimpses and hopefully even full scenes of joy. A strong tree, beautiful writing, a caring friend, the smile of a child, the excitement of a toddler, the warmth of a beloved. There are so many moments that if we pay attention, we can wrest joy from places where it may appear fallow. And as we have experienced our year together in the Fellowship for Religious Encounter, we have been joyful with one another, even as we've done it through Zoom, even as we have maintained our intimacy and our authenticity and connection while we were miles and continents apart. And so I'd like to offer a blessing for our Fellows for Religious Encounter, and then a concluding benediction for all who are participating in our worship today. Holy and eternal one, You have bound us together for a time as a community of learners and listeners for the advancement of interreligious dialogue, friendship, and understanding. We give you humble and heartfelt thanks for the important work we have shared in this year now ending. We are grateful for your patience with us, your forbearance and generosity, as we have sought authentic understanding of one another in a spirit of goodwill, laughter, and collegiality. We thank you for the virtues of forgiveness and mercy in the face of our failures or our uncertainties. We are especially grateful for your never-failing presence with us through this year of fellowship and religious encounter, and for the deeper knowledge of you and each other which we have attained. Source of wisdom, source of peace, we ask now for blessing to those who leave us and for those who remain. Grant that all of us, by drawing nearer to you, may always be close to each other in the communion of friendship, of hope, of trust that brought us together. Thank you, my friends, in the Fellowship for Religious Encounter. Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May the Holy One bless you and keep you. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichuneka. May God's countenance shine upon us and be gracious unto us. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May God's countenance be lifted and grant us all health, joy, friendship, understanding, justice, and peace. Amen.